Another air crash in Nepal. 18 people have died. Look at these visuals on your screen. Just moments from now. The remaining rubbles moments after the Notorious Airlines flight took off, and according to reports, in less than a minute, veered right and came crashing down, enveloped into a ball of smoke and fire. That's the rubble after the crash took place. At this point, we officially do not know what caused the crash, but the Kathmandu Post has reported that the crash was caused by a runway excursion during takeoff. According to Economic Times, the TIA spokesperson Subhash Jha has confirmed this information, stating the accident occurred after the Pokhara-bound flight suffered a runway excursion during takeoff.
ठोकेको देखियो आगो लागेको देखियो आगो मुस्लो धुवाहरू देखिए अब मान्छेहरू अब कोलाहल त्यही हो अब दुर्घटना जस्तो कोलाहल त भइ नै हाल्छ रिएक्सन त अब हामी आएको थियौँ त्यत्रो प्लेन दुर्घटना त आत्तिने भन्ने त स्वाभाविक भइहाल्यो हैन स्वाभाविक भइहाल्यो अब अवस्था दर्दनाकै अवस्था दयनीय अवस्था थियो कसले कसलाई बचाउनु त्यहाँ त्यो अब सानो दुर्घटना भएको प्लेन विस्फोट भइरहेछ आगो बलिरहेछ मान्छे छटपटिरहेछ.
But this unfortunately cannot be even seen as one isolated case. Around 350 people have died in Nepal since 2000. Just in January 2023, at least 72 people were killed in a Yeti Airlines crash that was later attributed to its pilots mistakenly cutting the power. No one survived. That's the crash, the Yeti Airlines crash of 2023. Today, though, there was one who managed to survive. A miraculous survivor. It was the pilot. The co-pilot and 17 others died in today's crash. This is what a grieved co-pilot's relative had to say.
इच्छा पनि थिएन आज उ गर्नलाई उसको नाम परेछ अहिले भिसा लागेको अब उता जाने बेला भएको अनि त्यो दुःख घटना अब आज त्यस्तो भयो.
Incidentally, according to data, Indians constitute the highest number of tourists in Nepal. In February this year, 1 in every 2 tourists were Indians. And you often hear of tales and social media narratives of landing amidst severe turbulence, which, by the way, is not unusual for Nepal. From inclement extreme weather to tabletop airports to smaller aircraft, but often aging and poorly maintained, all this amid a mushrooming Nepal aviation industry, which has been at the receiving end for poor or alleged poor regulation. And in fact, Nepali Airlines have been banned in several countries, including a ban by the European Union. My colleague Adarsh Vepachoda explains the precariousness.
It's a Bombardier CRJ-200 aircraft that we're talking about that has crashed at the Tribhuvan International Airport in Kathmandu. This is moments after takeoff, and this is one of the most important aspects that has to be underlined. You can see as to how the aircraft suddenly veers and then almost seems as though it lost control and crashed onto the ground at the Tribhuvan International Airport. What's important to note here is that this is moments after takeoff, and an aircraft shouldn't be making such an intense, such an aggressive turn right after takeoff. As a passenger, you would know that after takeoff, the aircraft flies to a certain altitude, at a certain speed. It reaches a certain point, only then does it take its first turn. But in this case, you can see that the aircraft appears to be very close to the runway, not having too much altitude. There was no reason why the pilot had to make such a turn. Whether this is the result of engine failure is something that only investigation, black box details will reveal more. But for now, what we can say with certainty is that the aircraft was turning at such a steep angle, very close to the ground. Very, very unusual for an aircraft. It's a CRJ-200, not one of your usual passenger type aircraft, which are larger, can hold more passengers. This can hold about 50 passengers. On board this aircraft were 19 individuals, 2 crew members, and 17 technical staff of the Shaurya Airlines that operates more such small aircraft. In fact, that's the Bombardier CRJ-200 is the aircraft that they operate in and around Nepal. In fact, in Nepal itself. Now, 2008 also. Shaurya Air was put on hold. Its operations were halted by the Tribhuvan airport because they could not fulfill their debts. But look at these visuals, moments after the crash, a while after the crash, efforts to find out as to what is going on. And of course, one pilot has been saved, which is quite miraculous. You can see the visuals. How is it that one pilot managed to survive this crash is something really miraculous. But yes, rest of the 18 people are dead. Of course, this entire crash also brings to the fore the aspect of tabletop runways. Remember, Tribhuvan International Airport in Kathmandu has a tabletop runway. Essentially means it's not ground surface. The runway is a little elevated. It is put on a plateau. Now that becomes a greater challenge, especially when you're landing at such airports. Kozhikode here in India is one such prime example of a tabletop runway. This is a tabletop runway as well at Tribhuvan Airport. But again, this aircraft, if you remember from what I said in the beginning, was taking off. It was not landing at the Tribhuvan International Airport. Landing and tabletop, again, we could have speculated that something may have gone wrong there. But clearly, moments after takeoff, the way that aircraft was turning, very, very unusual. We'll have to wait and see as to why this really happened. Black box will be key here.
Incidentally, there have been some disastrous crashes at tabletop airports in India as well. On May 22nd, 2010, Air India Express flight 812 from Dubai to Mangaluru crashed on landing, and 158 passengers, including 6 crew members, were killed. On August 7, 2020, the Air India Express flight from Dubai to Kozhikode was part of the Vande Bharat mission to bring back Indian nationals stranded due to COVID pandemic. The plane skidded off the tabletop runway and crashed below. 19 passengers and both pilots died, but 169 others survived. But remember this, both of these instances in India that I cited were crashes that happened during landing, which is extremely challenging on a tabletop airport. Unlike the current case in Kathmandu involving a crash during takeoff. And that's a very important difference to keep in mind. I'm being joined by my panelists at this point, but allow me to go to Kosh Raj Koirala at this point, who's an editor for Republica and based out of Nepal. Thank you very much, Mr. Kosh Raj Koirala. My first question, sir, has there been any official reasons cited for this crash? कोई official reason हमें बताया गया है अभी तक?
Well, thank you for having me. And so far, the government officials or the civil aviation officials, they have not cited any particular reason, but the government has formed one investigation commission, which has been given 45 days to submit its report. So there's no specific reason that has been given so far behind this accident.
Mr. Yes. Kosh Raj Koirala, there are some reports from Nepal in some news reports, as well as there's the TIA official who has also confirmed this to Economic Times. And it said that there seemed to have appeared an excursion during the takeoff. Has this been mentioned? How is this being looked at in Nepal?
Well, there seems like most of the people, they believe that there was a mechanical failure because the accident took place barely 22 seconds after its takeoff. And there was no further communication between air traffic controller and the pilot did not have chance to report any problems with the aircraft. But then again, since this accident took place within 22 seconds of the takeoff, and there's a belief that there must have been some mechanical failure, and also the pilot had several thousands of flying experience, and he would not have made a mistake that would eventually lead such a disaster. So yes, some people have attributed that to the mechanical issues, not the human errors.
Koshraj Koirala, and it's important that you mentioned that this was not a new captain. He had several hours of experience. We just also wanted to understand, there are reports that this flight, this particular aircraft, was going into a maintenance for a month in few days from now. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And there's a terminology called C-check for aircraft. And this aircraft also, as a part of this regular maintenance, it was supposed to undergo C-check of the entire aircraft. And since there was one separate hangars which was available, so the aircraft had actually taken permission from Civil Aviation Authority to fly it to Pokhara and undergo C-check there. But it doesn't mean that the aircraft already had certain, mechanical issues. It didn't, because there was nothing such reported. But when the accident took place, and
right,
the officials and all this there, yeah.
All right.
Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koshraj Koirala. Thank you very much for joining us. Just one last thing, Mr. Kosh. How is the pilot doing right now? Do we have any updates on his health? I hope, I'm being told he's out of danger. Is that correct?
No, lately we just had, talked to doctors involved in the treatment, and they have said that his health condition is critical. And they also said that he will have to undergo spinal cord surgery, and also some surgery in his head, like there is some deep injury in his forehead as well. So his condition remains critical now.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. I'm also being joined at this point by Devesh Agarwal, who's a chief analyst with BangaloreAviation.com, as well as Captain Amit Singh, who's a founder, Safety Matters Foundation. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Captain Amit Singh, if I can come to you first, what do you really make out of what's unfolded? I mean, let's just, before I go on to the several issues that are before us, do we just want to spend a moment to try and understand? Everybody has been killed in this particular crash, but there's a captain who is surviving. Just how miraculous, unusual is that?
Well, seeing the situation, it is quite miraculous, but people have survived crashes from greater heights too. It all depends on the trajectory, and because the aircraft seats are catered to take certain like they're called 16G seats. So that amount of force they can take, the seat belts. So there are certain safety systems. So survivability of a crash is always catered for, designed into the system when an aircraft is built. It could be one of those things, the trajectory at which the aircraft landed, what was the position of the pilot? Was he basically expelled from, ejected from the cockpit due to the impact? It all depends, can't say for sure, but it is miraculous. The aircraft, as we can see from the picture, the bank was pretty steep. It could be due to any number of reasons, mechanical failure of the, we got certain lift surfaces on the wing. It could be asymmetry, engine failure, but ultimately it is the skill of the pilot or the training of the pilot which saves the day. And there could be n number of failures, ultimately ends up in the lap of the pilot to handle. So it depends on the complexity of the situation. So there are certain situations in safety you call normal accident theories, in which the accident had to happen. It was bound to happen because of certain failures or compounded failures. So that the investigation
Okay.
will
All right.
reveal, be it technical or human factor. But the most important point is not to go for the proximate cause that caused the accident, but what was the root cause. Most of the investigations go for the
Right.
first failure or first reason they find, and they stick to that it was a pilot error or it was a technical
Right.
failure. But it
Okay.
could be a bigger systemic failure. So that needs to be found out and corrected so that future accidents are stopped.
Right. Mr. Devesh Agarwal, every time there's a crash, there's something which is spoken about the aviation industry, particularly in Nepal. There are so many allegations that keep surfacing every time, every now and then. Whether it be about the aging aircraft that's being used, whether it is about the poor maintenance, the training, there are so many aspects, and it's a mushrooming industry, as we've been told many times. Every time there's a crash, all of this crops up. Why is this such a big challenge, and why is it important not to see this as just a Nepal's problem?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me. Nepal, is suffering from not one issue, or this is not as Captain Amit Singh was saying. We need to get to the root cause. Thing with Nepal is you've got mountainous terrain. Mountainous terrain automatically limits the size of the airport because you don't have too much flat land available. So you see, even in India, the unfortunate times there have been crashes in the sub-Himalayan regions, the Indian Air Force and all. We have seen helicopters crash. It's been because of bad weather. We of course lost our chief of defense staff also in a bad weather accident. So one is weather. The other is Nepal's airlines got very badly hit post-COVID by the COVID pandemic. So their financial health has not been good. And lastly, as you pointed out, the regulator does not have the best of reputations. And so these three things are just showing up more in Nepal because I guess a little bit more of geography, a little bit more of the financial issues. But I mean, if you see, similar allegations have been levied against the Indian civil aviation, administrative and regulatory system. And I'm quite sure Captain Amit will bear me out. There are reasons for concern in this country also.
Captain Amit Singh, do you see this? Do you see merit to that? Do you think India has lessons to learn from this, or is it a neighborhood problem alone?
In aviation, we learn from everybody. So the saying goes that you won't live long enough to make it yourself, so learn from others' mistakes. If you look at India per se, we've had major accidents in Mangalore and Calicut. So the recommendations of those investigation committees have not been implemented till date. So if something happens again, then who is to blame for that? Because knowing very well that we have not implemented certain safety.
That's an important point you're saying. Captain Amit Singh, could you spend a minute on that? Could you help us understand what were these important, I don't expect you to go through all of them, but the big recommendations or the major recommendations that were made in these reports and that you see have not been implemented. This is important that people know about this.
In Calicut, if you see, there is a thing called runway end safety area, RESA, for if the aircraft overshoots. But the regulation requires that it has to be on both sides of the runway. If the aircraft undershoots, then there should be a stretch of land wherein it could, which could take the impact of the aircraft. And again, for the overshoot part. In Calicut, there is only for the overshoot of both the runways. So the recommendation was that if land cannot be acquired to extend the runway, then the length of the runway should be shortened so as to make that portion available. So that hasn't been done till date. It's been so many years now, and every monsoon this happens. So monsoon conditions are such in Calicut that the visibility is impaired It is what we call a black hole approach, that we don't have surrounding lights. The pilots do not have depth perception. The clouds are low. So everything is against the pilot. So the basic, any layman would understand that if there are constraints, then we should have better safety systems. Here we have constraints, but we have given exemptions to safety systems. For example, if the aircraft veers to the side of the runway, there is inadequate land as per the regulations. So we have given exemption, the DGC has given exemption that, okay, if we will limit the crosswind conditions, so the airport will shut down if the crosswinds are more than this. So things such as safety barriers can be installed, which was recommended long before. And even after Mangalore, there was a big hue and cry. And after Calicut, what surprised me was the statement of the ministry that it would be difficult to maintain that safety barrier in case there is damage. So we will not install it. So it is like saying that we will not install the seat belt because the seat belt might get frayed due to use. So that is the kind of logic we have. So there is no vision, there is no thought. So people are still waiting that if something happens, then we will see. So we are not proactive or predictive that we should do something to prevent, but we wait for something to happen, then we take measures. So that is called basically resilience. We say we are resilient, but we don't learn from that. That's so that we learn from our mistakes and make sure
You're
that
making
doesn't
such an
happen again.
important point,
Mistakes
Captain
keep on
Amit
happening again and
Singh.
again.
But
You know,
it is
Devesh
true.
Agarwal, let's just spend a minute more on what Captain Amit Singh is saying, because I was one of the reporters on ground when this accident, this crash did happen in Kozhikode as well, and I was covering this live. And one of the details that had emerged very soon after the crash was the pilot was extremely trained, had several hours of experience, decades of experience. He was not somebody who could have, you know, made this kind of an error, considering, I mean, anyone can make an error, but nonetheless, he had all the training and the hours that were required, far beyond that for that matter. Devesh Agarwal, to what Captain Amit Singh is saying, you know, there's a parallel with what happened in Kozhikode and what happened in Kathmandu. Of course, the circumstances were different. It was a landing, it was a takeoff, tabletop. All of that is there technically. But again, is there a let us see? We'll see when it happens. We have enough experienced pilots to be able to evade a disaster like this, or let's see when it happens. It's a very strong statement to make, Mr. Devesh Agarwal.
In fact, if Captain Amit Singh had not brought it up, I was about to bring it up. I was one of the first people in the world to report on the IX-812 crash in Mangalore. And even today, I think Mangalore Airport and Calicut Airport are not actually compliant to ICAO, which is the UN body, International Civil Aviation Organization. They are not compliant to their safety standards. What Captain Amit Singh said, there is no runway and safety area. Now they're thinking of building something and packing mud in it. Why? Because the engineered material arresting system, EMAS as it's called, it is not suitable for India. There is all kinds of excuses given. What Captain Amit Singh was saying, there are certain safety recommendations that were made, and the Airports Authority of India was required to implement it, I think, if I recall, 1st of April of 2023. This is 15 months later, and they've been still given one more extension, or rather two more extensions. And there is, the way they're proceeding, it doesn't look it'll get even done by 2025. And in the meantime, just not even 90 kilometers away is Kannur Airport, which is one of the best state-of-the-art airports. I would probably say one of the best airports in the state of Kerala, one of the better airports in South India. And it is not being used. Whereas Calicut Airport, which is such a dangerous thing, and y'all are flashing the video. If your producers stop at the Calicut thing, your viewers will be able to see. Because if they put this runway area, this RISA runway and this thing, it will shorten the runway. The moment you shorten the runway, now I cannot
It's on
land
the
bigger
screens.
aircraft. No, I will be forced to land only smaller A320s. I can't even land A321s. So that affects the politics of the game. You know, so I'm and regrettably, the problem in our country is the ministry controls the airport operator, the ministry controls the regulator, the ministry controls the investigator, and up till about 2-3 years ago, the ministry even controlled the airline. Now, it is literally like the fox guarding the hen house. How can the regulator and the operator be from the same ministry? I mean, at some point, there has to be an independence brought in to the regulator. There is a bill called the CAA bill that has been pending
Okay,
since
okay, hold
2015.
that point there. Hold that
Yeah.
point there. I may not be correct on this, but correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't that really the problem with Nepal as well? Apparently, they don't have an independent regulator.
Yes, it
Isn't
is.
that again a similarity between Nepal and India? Am I correct on this or wrong?
You are absolutely correct. I even told you right at the beginning. I told you some of the same allegations or the same complaints or the same concerns that are being raised on Nepal's civil aviation regulator equally apply to India's civil aviation regulator. It is not any significantly different. Maybe there it is a little more under the government's control. Here it is slightly less under the government's control, but it is still under the government's control. It is in the same ministry as the airlines and the airports. You can't have a policeman sitting in the same under the same control systems as the people who run society or whatever. I mean, it's not correct. You need to have an independent civil aviation administration. And that bill is pending in Parliament since it was
Right.
approved by Cabinet in 2014. It has never been brought to the floor of the Parliament till today. It's 10 years, over 10 years. That is the lesson we have to learn.
Okay.
I'm not saying
All right.
we're going to have one more Nepal here, but it is definitely a concern and a lesson we need to learn.
All right, Captain Amit Singh, my last question to you. We are getting short on time as well. Captain Amit Singh, as we see and we discuss what's unfolding in Nepal, what seems to be very obvious with what you both are saying, there are huge lessons for India to take from this. But our Indian officials, our Indian authorities, is the Indian government in that sphere, in that mode, where they want to see the elephant in the room? Or do they see the elephant in the room, but there's a lack of political will? What is the issue?
One, there is no vision. So we don't have a long-term roadmap for aviation. It is a very short-term and a knee-jerk reaction way that patches that we keep building up and patching up. Like said earlier, that the investigation board in India is an attached office to the ministry. It is not independent. We need to learn. It is a system wherein we need to learn from the accidents and make sure that they do not happen. But if we do not release accident reports, make it public, we are not open to discussions, we don't reveal the data, everything is closed door. And this biggest stakeholder, which is the public, is not given access to anything. So today is a day and age wherein there is transparency everywhere, but here in the accident investigation area, there is no transparency. So how to get away with murder this is how we do it. That there are so many areas where their investigations are doctored. So the reports have been doctored, but the ministry does not take any feedback for reopening of investigations. So basically, the people are not heard. Stakeholders, it has to be a collaborative decision making.
Okay.
That is not happening. It is basically top-down approach from the ministry.
Okay.
That is impairing the whole system.
Devesh Agarwal, my last question to you, Devesh Agarwal. Have pilots raised this concern? Have associations of pilots had talks with the minister, the civil aviation minister, this government or earlier? Because this seems to be a long-standing issue. This seems to be, as both of you, with your years of experience, seem to be very well aware. You've drawn a very big parallel and correlation between Nepal and India, saying there are definite elephants in the room that need to be addressed. So has this been officially raised up by pilot bodies? Have the ministers been held to account?
In 2010, the government themselves created a civil safety oversight committee called CASAC. Okay, and because too many embarrassing questions got asked, by 2013 or 2014, they shut it down. So the answer is political will. ultimately the bureaucrats will follow what the politicians want. What Captain Amit Singh is saying, there has to be independence. In the United States, we hear of a body called the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board. It is not attached to any department in the United States. It's a completely independent body. The head of the NTSB is appointed directly by the President of the United States. No other this thing. So you need to have, as I said, that CAA bill is pending for the last 10 years. Nobody wants to take a decision. The elephant in the room is known to everybody.
The
I will
CAA would mean here? The
Civil
CAA,
Aviation
because there's
Authority,
another
if I
CAA
remember.
that I'm sure people are more aware of.
Yeah, it was basically, the idea was to replace the DGCA with a completely independent civil aviation authority, which will take funding from the passengers in the form of,
Okay.
every passenger will contribute some small amount, 5 rupees, 10 rupees, or whatever in the price of the ticket to fund this body, and therefore it will not be dependent on any ministry for either staffing or for funding, and it will be truly independent.
Okay.
Today, you want to know a state of situation. In 2022, on 26 December, an Air India Express plane took off. The engine stopped midway. The plane had to divert to Chennai. It has been revealed, and it's there on the DGCA portal today. There is a report that CFM, the engine manufacturer, had Air India Express has paid CFM for the engine monitoring system, and CFM alerted Air India through their portal 6 days ahead of time that this engine is giving us, odd results. Please inspect it, and they never bothered doing it. 6 days, and when
Wow.
when they were questioned,
All
sir, the
right.
aircraft was
Okay,
not
we're
long
talking.
enough on the ground for us to inspect it, and the DGCA report shows that the aircraft was on the ground, not on one instance, on 2 instances long enough for that maintenance to be done.
Okay,
It has
huge,
happened right
huge
now. It is still
questions.
happening
And
right
I
now.
guess that's really the purpose of having this discussion. It's just the huge concerns around this. This is a very important sector, the aviation sector. Lives of millions, billions for that matter, are at stake. Devesh Agarwal, as well as Captain Amit Singh, thank you very much for joining us. You've raised some very, very important points. And to the government, we just have one thing to say. These are discussions that are collaborative. There may be criticisms that are coming up, but this is for the government to take stake off, because these involve the lives of not just Indians, but so many other factors at stake. It's better to have embarrassing questions to have none at all. Thank you very much to our panelists for joining us.